Coming up on this week's podcast, how will McLaren react having now won the constructors title? Can Max Verstappen keep his fine form going in Texas? Will Mercedes deliver once again in toasty conditions? And will we finally see Lewis Hamilton on the podium for Ferrari? It's time for the latest episode of the Racing News 365 podcast. And welcome to the latest episode of the Racing News 365 podcast, looking ahead to this weekend's United States Grand Prix. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by the dynamic duo that is 2023 Young Journalist of the Year, Sam Absolutely Coop, and the man, the myth, the almighty legend, who is heading out to the circuits of the Americas on Wednesday. It is, of course, lead editor Ian Parkson. Ian, I'll come to you first because it is the Americas doubleheader, not tripleheader. It's worth pointing out. You are jetting off to Texas for the circuits of the Americas before going on to Mexico City for next week's Mexico City Grand Prix. And it's fair to say it's going to be a toasty one.
Very toasty looking at the weather forecast. I think we're going to see back-to-back heat hazard warnings for the drivers because, of course, if you remember back to Singapore, FIA on the Thursday, I think it was there, they announced that for the coming weekend, they were going to introduce this new heat hazard whereby the drivers could choose to wear the cooling vest that is going to become controversially mandatory for next season. The cooling vest is the system whereby ice cold water is pumped around it, keeping the drivers cool for a certain period of time. The offset, if you don't wear the vest, is that any driver who doesn't has to have a half a kilo of ballast in his cockpit. So yes, this weekend we have got forecasts of 32 on Friday, 33 on Saturday, and 32 on Sunday. The threshold for the FIA confirming a heat hazard warning is 31. So expect something out of the FIA early on Thursday morning that the drivers once again will be asked if they want to wear that cooling vest. As I say, it's not mandatory this season. And there's a lot of contentious comments around the fact that it's going to be mandatory next season. A lot of drivers, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton in particular, basically saying, look, it should be our choice whether we do this or not. We appreciate the safety implications, but this is one of those where for our personal comfort, and a lot of drivers do feel uncomfortable with it, for our personal comfort, we feel we should be given the choice as to whether to wear it or not for next season. As I say, right now, if there is going to be a heat hazard warning for the United States Grand Prix, the drivers are free to choose whether they want to do so or not. But yes, very toasty indeed coming up in Austin this weekend.
It is hotting up in Austin, Texas. It's also hotting up in the drivers' title fight because the constructors' title is done and dusted. We don't need to discuss that anymore. And Sam, two-way fight or three-way fight?
Three-way fight.
Yeah, straight to it, straight to the point. Okay, we'll go into that. Go on.
You can't count out Max Verstappen. We've said this umpteen times over the last 6 months, and the maths is still there. It's still possible. Some will reduce it to pure maths. However, all it takes is another little swing in Max's favour over these next two rounds, and you've got a 4-race run to the finish line in which Max, if he's within 50 points, it could be, just a case of one DNF, one poor qualifying session, and that could befall any three of those guys. And also, you look at the equation of two McLarens potentially taking points off each other. You've got Max Verstappen, sole in Red Bull. Yes, he'd like Yuki Tsunoda there to play rear gunner, but he will have his entire team focused on him, whereas McLaren have to split their kind of focus between Oscar and Lando equally, might we add, as well, which further kind of muddies the water for them. There have been comparisons made to 2007. They are pretty apt. There's on multiple fronts. This is a similar story to how Kimi Räikkönen somehow stole the title from under the noses of Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. So yeah, plenty to play for. And Max Verstappen is a formidable talent. Not saying Kimi Räikkönen isn't, but Max Verstappen is Max Verstappen.
Plenty to discuss on this week's podcast. I need to cough very quickly. And that's better. Right, anyways, just before we get on with everything to discuss, we've got to do our fun question for this week's episode, and it's to do with Lewis Hamilton, who is the most successful driver, of course, in the United States Grand Prix, with 6 victories to his name in the USGP. So, an interesting one for you both. When was the last time Lewis Hamilton finished the US Grand Prix off the podium? So he actually had to cross the checker flag. So I'm not counting 2023 when he was obviously disqualified, or last year when he beached his Mercedes. When did he last finish the race in the US off the podium? Tough one.
Off the podium. I'm going to
2013, I'm going to say. First year at Mercedes.
2013.
Do you agree?
I would have thought
Closest from 2012. So he had 2007 at Indy, which he won. 2012, I'm pretty sure he won the first, or maybe Jensen did. But either way, 2013 is what I'm saying.
No, it's going to be 2023 because he was disqualified.
This is the whole point. So that doesn't count. So he had to actually finish. So I'm not counting that because he was disqualified, and last year he beached himself in the gravel, so retired from the race. When was the last time he legally finished the US Grand Prix and was off the podium? Sorry, keyword there being legally.
I listened to your caveat there, Nicola.
Thank you.
Sorry, somebody wasn't. Well, yeah, then it's going to be 20. I'm going to go 2013.
And you would both be correct. It was the last time he finished the race off the podium. So it's a good venue for Lewis. Will this weekend finally be the one where he gets his first Grand Prix podium for Ferrari? We'll discuss that in a little bit. First things first, though.
There's a whole thing around that.
There is, as we'll get on to later on. First things first. Ian, I'll come to you first. What is the biggest thing you are looking forward to this weekend's sprint US Grand Prix? Worth pointing that out.
The fact that it's probably going to be a sprint event at the Circuit of the Americas, which is one of my favourite circuits, I've got to say. I just think Turn 1 is one of the all-time classic greats that's been developed, created, manufactured, whatever you want to look at. That uphill rise, and it is, when you're standing at pit level, that is... You probably don't appreciate too much from the TV pictures, but it is considerable. And then that sharp left-hander out of turn 1, that turn 1. I just think it's a classic corner with many a good incident over the years through there as well. And it wouldn't surprise me if we get something similar, not just in the sprint, but obviously the Grand Prix as well. So it's just a great track. It beautifully created, that fast sweep. And then at the back end of the circuit as well, where there are good overtaking opportunities. So it's just one of the best circuits in F1 for me. And obviously the fact I'm going to be in Austin this weekend as well, which is a great place, not just to have a Grand Prix. It's one of those tracks where whenever people ask me, where would I recommend? And for an all-rounder in terms of great racing, great event, but also a place to visit on the back of it, Austin over a Grand Prix weekend just comes alive. And as an all-round package for both racing and event, it is right up there. It's certainly put in the top 3, maybe top 2 in terms of race and event as an all-round package, as I say. So, yeah, it's just a good place to be, good vibe. And we got the good weather this weekend as well. If you remember, it's not always like that. It's quite... Those temperatures I read out, or I mentioned earlier, they are actually quite unseasonable because it's normally a lot cooler than that. We've seen horrific storms over the years as well, straight the circuit. I remember going to Austin one morning at the Grand Prix circuit, and it was actually frost on my car that particular morning. It was that chilly. So just gives you some idea as to the vagaries of the weather that can take place over the course of the Austin Grand Prix weekend. This weekend, as I mentioned, we have got tremendous heat, so that's going to be particularly testing for everybody there. Well, obviously, for the most part, the drivers, of course. But yes, just an all-round package. Great place to be.
the complete opposite weather to what the World Endurance Championship had for their Lone Star event,
Yeah.
obviously held
Oh
at
my God, that was
COTA.
floods.
I
That was
think it's a
almost
month ago,
floods.
and the
Yeah.
track
So
was underwater. A lot of water. Sam, I'll let you go next because mine, what I look forward to most for this weekend, leads into the first talking point. Because I'm going to vent a little bit. So, Sam, for you,
Oh, here we go.
Here we
Here we
go.
go.
Sam, what are you looking forward to most ahead of this weekend?
I think really, I'm going to keep it really obvious and straight to the point. It's to see how that RB21 matches up against the MCL 39 on a kind of medium speed circuit. I mentioned a few weeks ago that Lauren Mecky's highlighted how previously, before the floor upgrade that came at Monza, McLaren had killed Red Bull on that profile of circuit. Referring to Zandvoort at the time, which obviously is a very different challenge to the circuit of the Americas. Let's caveat that. But I'm intrigued to see how the two cars will stack up, because they will tell us a lot about what we can expect from the rest of the year, and also therefore inform just how much Max is in that title fight. So yeah, I'm excited about that. There's also some real jeopardy for the teams. It's a Pirelli tyre range. It's a step change this weekend. So you've got the hard tyre, then you step, and then you've got the medium and the softs. You've also got a sprint weekend, so only 1 hour of practice. So it's a real unknown and uncertainty that the teams are faced with, getting up to speed, soft, long runs, short runs on these 3 compounds within an hour. Someone surely at some point is going to make a mistake, and that makes the sprint even more important, because it is a trial run. It's a rehearsal for the first third of the race in some ways.
It's a tough one because you do not want to make a mistake. Right, are we ready for Nick's vents? Start your stopwatches, because this will lead into the first big talking point. Because for me, the biggest thing I'm looking forward to this weekend is seeing how McLaren are going to react, having now won the Constructors' title. In an ideal world, this would be the end of team orders, McLaren getting involved over the radio. They would just let Lando and Oscar fight to see whichever driver comes out on top to win a maiden title. However, I simply do not see how that's going to be the case, because they've gotten involved so many times this season for so many minor and major incidents. For example, you think back to Austria and Hungary, where Oscar was told to calm down, be careful effectively when he locked up twice when trying to overtake Lando, and to effectively McLaren rules and follow all that jazz. Does this mean that going forwards, if the opposite happens and Lando locks up when trying to overtake Oscar, he's going to get a similar message? I'm not sure. You look at something we've discussed recently, obviously, with what happened in Monza. If Oscar is ahead of Lando, has a slow pit stop, and falls behind his teammate, is Lando going to be asked to give the position back to Oscar? I just feel, for me, that McLaren has gotten involved so many times this season, even with the decision they made in Singapore. Is it now okay for Oscar to potentially make contact with Lando on the opening lap in a racing incident, gain the position and keep it? For me, there's just been so many times of where McLaren has gotten involved at times it didn't need to, where I don't think it can now go from 100 to 0 and just not get involved at all. But it's worth pointing out as well that we've still got 6 Grand Prix remaining. That's 25% of this season. We've still got 3 sprints. That's 50% of the sprint races. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of races, a lot of laps for them to manage. And I'm just intrigued. And I'll come to you this, Ian. I'm really intrigued with how they are going to react, because ultimately this is now a very different situation, because the Constructors' title, that's done and dusted. Congrats, McLaren. But it's a thing of the past now.
It is a thing of the past, but I get the impression from the way Andrea Stella has operated, given the comments that he's made after these various incidents that have taken place, that nothing's going to change. They've got their rules, whatever you want to call them, McLaren's rules, Papaya Rules. We like the Papaya Rules. That was his own phrase that he came up with at the time after Monza last year. And as I say, yes, they've got themselves in trouble. They've tied themselves up in a fair few knots on occasion, but it's the way McLaren has decided to go about its racing. And I can understand that from various perspectives, they see that Oscar as being hard done by, and the fact that Lando is slightly being favoured inside McLaren. They would never see it that way. Quite obviously, they believe that both drivers have equal status. They are both number one drivers in the eyes of Zak Brown and Andrea Stella. And whilst I'm assuming many people will disagree with that from their outside in looking perspective, McLaren would absolutely categorically state that is the way we view our drivers. They both have this equal status. We have these rules. This is the way we want them to go about racing. And whilst many people, again, from the outside looking in, might not agree with it, as far as McLaren is concerned, it is trying to do right for both its drivers, by both of its drivers. And yes, certain perspectives around a particular instance may view it as that Lando is being favoured at present. As I say, McLaren would wholly disagree with that, and I do not believe there's going to be any kind of change going forward from the US Grand Prix this weekend onwards, simply because that constructors title is now in their back pocket.
And actually, Sam, I'll come to you because obviously, Ian, I think really well said, but actually it's quite clear. It's a very delicate situation that McLaren now has on its hands. And as we've seen on social media and obviously in our comments and our videos as well, we can discuss this, that Lando does seem to be getting quite a lot of criticism for, people believing he's being favoured, this and that, as you've just explained, Ian. And that's the big thing, Sam, isn't it? That in a way, McLaren has created this really delicate, situation it's now got to handle. And obviously the big problem is it's not just a title fight between its own drivers. It does have to keep a very close eye on Max Verstappen, because one little slip up across these remaining 6 races and 3 sprints from the team, from either of its drivers, and that is Max, right back in the fight. There are 33 points up for grabs this weekend, a double McLaren DNF and a Max win, and all of a sudden that gap is, next to nothing. It's delicate, isn't it?
It's very delicate. And Ralf Schumacher was talking about this last week, and he was saying that almost his fear is that at some point the two McLarens don't come out the first corner at the same, together. And Max then goes on and wins that race. And that is exactly the scenario you've just described. So that is the jeopardy there. That is the danger that McLaren have. And that is why they will be so keen to maintain the status quo they have, had throughout the year, through last year. Regardless of what you think, whether or not it's positive or it's negative, they will want to keep that kind of consistency moving forward, because it's what their drivers know, it's what the team knows, it's how they've always operated. You don't want to change it, at the, kind of the 1 yard line, essentially, for them. Max is a looming threat. I mentioned 2007 earlier. He actually, statistically, if you kind of wait for different points and so on and so forth, against that season, has a less to make up than Kimi Räikkönen did. He has a better chance of winning this title than Kimi Räikkönen did at this relative stage, 24% of the season to go in 2007. Yes, obviously McLaren was an absolute mess in 2007. I don't think I'm being unfair in saying that. It's a very different scenario now. But the concern is that this tinkering, this constant playing with Papaya Rules and trying to over-engineer and manipulate certain scenarios in McLaren's favour, or the one driver's favour, to correct a perceived wrong that has happened, from the team's doing, say, a bad pit stop or a strategic misstep, is ultimately going to end up with an unfair hand for one of the drivers. And this is what the fan bases online are really kind of discontent about. There are points throughout the year that Oscar fans, at the moment, we're seeing this, are really unhappy with his treatment, but there have been times in the past when fans have been unhappy with Lando's treatment. So it does kind of ebb and flow. McLaren will want harmony to continue. They want the 1-2s. They want to keep on going as they have done. Partly because just because you won the constructors title, it doesn't get reduced down to, it doesn't matter if you guys both crash out. We've done what we need to do. You've still got sponsors. You've still got all these people asking. You have to answer to. Zak Brown doesn't want to get a call from however many sponsors at the end of the Grand Prix and go, "What was that? We were expecting 60 minutes worth, 90 minutes worth of coverage. Your guys are at the first corner. We've paid you millions to be on TV. he's done well to cultivate a huge roster of sponsors. He doesn't want to just kind of blow that up because they've achieved their primary goal in winning the Constructors' Championship. So they will very much continue the same. And yeah, as for the fan bases, it ebbs and flows, and you can't keep everyone happy. But I understand that this tinkering and this playing is upsetting people.
And there's obviously as well this bubbling tension between Oscar and Lando that the team are going to have to address. And obviously it'll be interesting how it comes across this weekend in the on-track battle, should Oscar be fighting Lando or vice versa, given what happened on the opening lap in Singapore and Lando making contact with Max and Oscar. Obviously the FIA quickly said racing incident, absolutely fine, play on effectively, and McLaren agreed. For Oscar, this surely now will show him that, okay, this kind of thing, we can now be aggressive with one another. There's no, being really careful not to make contact. If it happens, it happens. It's another thing, Ian, isn't it, that the team are going to have to manage really carefully because, again, as we've discussed, one small slip up from the team or either driver, and there's a certain Dutchman just there waiting to take the opportunity.
Got to assume that it would all have been addressed by now, quite obviously, in the days that followed the Singapore Grand Prix, what occurred during that Turn 3 incident between Lando and Oscar. So will both drivers be clear? You would assume so. How will both drivers view certain situations going into each particular weekend? That's only going to be judged with a given incident at any particular time. Do I suspect Oscar, on the back of what happened in Singapore, will probably have sharpened his elbows a bit more? I believe he most definitely will have done over these past few days. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't do, because he will in particular feel more aggrieved, bearing in mind what happened in Singapore, and of course bearing in mind what happened in Monza especially as well, when you consider that pit stop, Lando's slow pit stop, and the fact that Oscar was asked to give the position back, and Oscar was slightly bewildered by that because he assumed, given the previous discussions around McLaren's Papaya Rules, that would not be the case, because it was simply an incident that occurred during a Grand Prix at the time. It was just natural that Lando, unfortunately for him at that particular stage, had a slower pit stop and it put him back behind Oscar. But as I say, Oscar was forced, or asked to at least, give the place back, and he did comply. So with the threat of Max Verstappen, it does add an extra dimension to the 6 Grand Prix and the 3 sprints we've got left, providing it goes all that way with Max, of course, right to the right to the wire, right to the death. But it is going to be an interesting dynamic now between Lando and Oscar, especially, I feel. And I am wondering, as I say, whether Oscar, and I believe he will have done, has really got those elbows sharpened, and he's going to be prepared for battle with Lando now. He's seen what took place in Singapore, what Lando, he feels, got away with, despite McLaren's version of the events and the way they looked on things at that particular time. And he's going to feel, right, if that's the case, if you're going to do that with Lando, wait till we face a similar situation at an upcoming Grand Prix or sprint, and then let's see what happens with me when I maybe do something similar. Fascinating stuff.
I think in many ways, Media Day in Austin, so this coming Thursday, will very much not only set the tone for the United States Grand Prix between the 2 drivers, but also the rest of the year. And me and Ian, actually, we had a conversation on the phone about this recently, and we were kind of wondering what we're going to get from Lando and Oscar, and Lando in particular, in Austin on Thursday. Are you going to see him backtrack a little bit like he did at Silverstone last year after his clash with Max Verstappen in Austria? Will he back down and say, I was wrong, I was too aggressive, I shouldn't have done that? Or is he going to stand true and say, no, the team felt it was fair at the time, we've reviewed it, we still feel it's fair, in which case everyone's looking at Oscar and you're going, okay, well, now it's your turn to respond. You've got to match that intensity, that aggression that Lando has shown in Singapore. And that is absolutely the aggression and intensity that Lando needs to provide. Is Oscar able to do that as well? You'd assume he will be able to, but that's really what's going to be so telling about Media Day in Austin. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on our website, because no doubt we will be covering that. So yeah, that's a really intriguing element early in the weekend in Austin to look forward to.
Well, I mean, I guess it goes into 4 words, doesn't it? I don't even need to say it. I don't even need to say it because I've got a hat.
Yes! I didn't know there was a hat. There actually is a hat.
Yes.
For those who are watching, listening to this on any audio platform rather than watching, I have purchased a hat which does say on it, "Only time will tell." It has been the biggest hassle. It's become the biggest hassle getting this hat to arrive, but it has arrived. And yes, only time will tell. But actually, let's go on.
Brilliant.
Some people will argue it says only will time tell.
Yeah, but honestly, I had to make the design happen before the people then did the stitching and everything. And I was trying to think if I could do it backwards, and it was just. But I was thinking if I then wear it in public, I'm probably not going to. Let's be honest, it looks ridiculous. But yes. Anyways, right, let's crack on because we've still got a lot of time to discuss. I'll keep on for the rest of the episode. Why not? We've got to talk though more about Max because we've spoken about what happens if the McLarens clash and all this and that, and that opens the door to Max. Yes, Max is very much in form. Let's point this out. He's not actually been beaten by McLaren since Red Bull fitted this new floor for Monza. He's obviously had 2 wins and then second place in Singapore. It's worth pointing out as well that while Verstappen finished third in Texas last season, 21, 22 and 23, he won all 3 years. So he likes this track. We know that it suits his style very, very well. And obviously with the sprint as well, that's 33 points up for grabs. We could see a big swing. However, we could also see a big swing the other way because yes, whilst Sam has nothing to lose and can just go gung-ho and give it everything, he also can't afford a bad weekend because 1 DNF or 1 non-points finish or a small points finish, and that is the slim hopes of a 5th record-equaling consecutive title gone and done.
This is what's so exciting about the position Max is in, because we haven't seen Max like this since 2021, where he's really had to get the bit between his teeth and claw back an advantage. You could argue early 2022, yes, but he had more than enough time over the course of the year to wrap out that title fairly comfortably. And if you remember, the US Grand Prix in 2021 was the scene of arguably one of his greatest victories as well. How he kind of managed to wrestle that away from Lewis Hamilton that weekend. So it will be really interesting to see how measured and methodical Max can be in fighting the McLarens, because Oscar and Lando could easily go, well, if he wants to crash, that's fine, because that is a net gain, a net benefit to us. So Max has to, kind of very much be kind of delicate in his approach. As I say, more calculated, more methodical. That is something we have seen Max add to his arsenal in the last few years, which he maybe didn't have in 2021. How well can he use that now? And that's, what makes this so interesting from a Max Verstappen perspective. Yeah.
But what's
okay,
also
it happens to the best of us.
Yeah,
I know. I'm gonna have some water.
The thing that's then another factor into this, because Lando has spoken a few times to how he obviously needs drivers to get between him and Oscar for these big point swings, and obviously Max needs really the same thing to be happening for him against the McLarens. And this is now another factor based on what we saw in Singapore is somehow, whether they now know, we'll find out this weekend, the Mercedes worked in the hot conditions, and that would argue that perhaps it could work again this weekend as well. We know that Lewis has got an incredible record for Mercedes, obviously, at the Circuit of the Americas. George has also done very well here. So we know that Mercedes tend to go well at the Circuit of the Americas. And Ian, this is a thing as well, because, I imagine we'll find out on Thursday, Media Day, if Mercedes has now discovered why it did so well at Singapore, because it had no clue after Singapore itself. But that could be a big factor if they get involved in this fight as well for victory this weekend.
Yeah, it was just the way they've managed to set up the car. Andrew Shublin, the trackside engineering director, revealed in a little Mercedes post-race debrief that the team puts out that for them, yes, they just managed to get a bit of a sweet spot, managed to, as I say, get those tyres working. The front wing as well, the new front wing on that Mercedes W16, that added to it just a little bit from their perspective. But then he did caveat by saying, hold your horses, just because it worked well there does not necessarily mean it's now going to work well over the remaining 6 Grand Prix. It's all about trying to get that car in the right setup window, which that team has struggled with more often than not over the course of this season. And it was just the fact that through qualifying especially, George just hit that sweet spot and it netted that pole position. And of course, it netted that race victory where we barely saw that car afterwards, once it just disappeared after the first lap, it was not even in barely a TV shot worthy of the name until he actually took the checkered flag. So with McLaren, we know that this is it. They're not going to upgrade that car anymore. Done and dusted quite a while back. Mercedes, as I say, tweaks here and there, but predominantly around setup now, it seems. Pierre Vacher, the Red Bull technical director, told me after the Singapore Grand Prix that there is going to be more bits on that car, but not specifically for this weekend. So now it's going to be about trying to optimize that RB21, and given its performance over these past three Grand Prix in particular, since that new floor was introduced in Monza, performed well again in Azerbaijan. And then, of course, we had the new front wing following on from that around Singapore. It performed well to not as well as they wanted around Singapore, because obviously Mercedes ultimately, in particular with George, just managed to comfortably dominate that Grand Prix. But nevertheless, the package that Red Bull has now, it's one that Max feels comfortable with, which he didn't do pre-summer break in particular, which is why team car driver had that real mid-season slump after a reasonably solid start where Max was looking in good shape, but nevertheless, we could all see that Red Bull was not quite at the races with McLaren for the most part. Now it's come out of this, as I say, this mid-season slump. Max is comfortable with the car again, and he's just relaxed as well. That's the main thing as well. Max is just going into each race, one Grand Prix at a time, as he's stated now for quite a few races. And it's a case of whatever comes out of it, great. If I'm closer to the McLaren guys, absolutely fantastic. If I'm not, oh well. You know, that mid-season for me, it is what it is. That's where if he's not in a position, in particular going into those final three Grand Prix where he's really in the mix, then we just look back to this real mid-season drop for Red Bull and the RB21 as to why Max might not be in the running for those final three Grand Prix. But at least now, as I say, a comfortable Max, a happy Max is a dangerous Max in my book.
I think it's so fascinating how this season has gone from obviously Red Bull's massive drop-off and, Max not being in the title fight discussions, Red Bull certainly not being in the constructors title fight discussions, to now ultimately everything revolving around him in terms of the drivers' title fight, also the constructors in the fight for second, because obviously Mercedes has a 27-point lead over Ferrari. Ferrari sits in third, and then you've got Red Bull in fourth, who are a further 8 points adrift of Ferrari, so 35 points off Mercedes. So effectively, if Max has a good weekend, that gap to Mercedes comes down. If Max has a bad weekend, the Mercedes grip on second tightens. And Ian, it's funny you mentioned that obviously Max is happy, he's comfortable, he's dangerous. Sam, the same can't really be said for Ferrari at the moment. Obviously, another shocking weekend they had in Singapore, but it's worth pointing out that they did claim a 1-2 in Texas last year. Charles Leclerc ahead of Carlos Sainz, so it's clearly a venue that Leclerc likes. We know Lewis loves the track. I think it's probably one of his favourite on the calendar, one of his most successful venues on the calendar. It's an important weekend for Ferrari, it feels, to not only get themselves back into contention for second, but also to ensure they don't fall into a distant fourth.
It's a very important weekend, and unfortunately the SF25 is not the SF24 because, as you rightly pointed out, it was a very strong package around COTA last year. They are just so at a loss as to how things have kind of reached this point, because the suspension upgrade that they spent, so much time and effort hasn't, using hasn't delivered any measurable gain, any improvement. And they prioritize that over other areas, over, other aerodynamic upgrades that they really felt could have probably brought them closer into the mix at this stage. But they took the wrong turn, seemingly, and this is where the end product of it is at this stage. And also with COTA, it's a track that if you run the car a little bit too low, you're at risk of wearing out your skid block and getting disqualified. And we know that that is a problem for the SF25 and has plagued their season because they've had to run it higher than they would have liked. Yeah. So they could be Yeah, exactly. So they could be in for a really difficult weekend in Austin, and they've scored consistent points throughout the year, but those have been consistently kind of fifth, sixth, seventh, and you've seen higher peaks for the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull, especially with George and Max performing in the way that they have been. And at this stage of the year, that's going to yield more points, and that is what leaves Ferrari on the back foot. They were ultimately in the fight in second, partly because they had two consistent points finishers, whereas Red Bull and Mercedes didn't. If Kimi Antonelli can continue the form he's shown in the last couple of rounds, that will, make it almost impossible for Ferrari to fight with Mercedes. If Yuki can get back in the hunt, and we saw that a little bit in Baku, that will also make things more difficult. And Max obviously is Max at this stage. So it's that road to second place in the Constructors' Championship is increasingly difficult for Ferrari. They very well could end this year in fourth, having targeted a Constructors' Championship at the beginning of the year, and that be the expectation, and a fair expectation at that.
And Sam, I'll stick with you because at the beginning of the podcast, when I pointed out, obviously, it's normally a very good venue for Lewis Hamilton is COTA. And it's obviously, as you also alluded to as well, quite a significant weekend for him.
Yes. So this weekend is Lewis's 19th weekend with Ferrari. And he is set to take sole ownership of a very unfortunate record if he cannot reach the podium at COTA. And that will be the longest period at the start of a Ferrari tenure without scoring a podium. He will take that off Didier Pironi. And that is a record that has been, I'm pronouncing it right. Didier? Yep.
Didier, yeah.
Yep. Because I remember on a previous podcast, our pronunciations were different. But anyway, that record has stood for 43 years, since 1982. That record is older than Lewis. And so, Lewis has to get a podium. Otherwise, he will inevitably go at least 20 races without a podium to start his Ferrari tenure. And that just shows how difficult this year has been for him, and also how rare it is for a driver of Lewis's caliber not to get a podium in their first 19, 20 races at Ferrari. So, it's a big weekend for Lewis. And if I'm being honest, I can't see how he's not going to end up taking that record.
Ian, your thoughts on Ferrari? It's a difficult one, isn't it?
I agree with Sam. It's regardless of Lewis's record around this circuit and how well he's performed in the past, Charles, they just do not have the car beneath them at present to give them the performance, the comfort that they are seeking or have been seeking and that they desire. Talked about Max just recently about how comfortable and happy he is with that car right now, and look at the performances he's producing. Ferrari's been trying desperately to make similar gains and steps with its car over the course of this season, and no matter what it has tried and no matter what setup it has taken, and Charles Leclerc has referred to going down some wild routes most recently with that car, and it just not paying off. Overall for Ferrari, it's just now starting to look like it's going to be a season to forget, and it cannot wait to get into 2026, the new rules package, and hopefully there it will come flying out the gate and giving both Lewis and Charles a car that it can fight with next season, that it just has not been able to pretty much at almost every single of the previous 18 Grand Prix that we've had so far. It's just been a really poor season. And yes, going from so close last season to being Constructors' champions for the first time in what would have been 16 years, and then potentially now finishing fourth, and given the points gap as well to McLaren, it was 14 points at the end of last season. That's how close they came. And this right now, it's like something over 350 points. It's something outrageous. To have fallen that far behind the leading team when that team itself, the Scuderia, was expected to post more of a robust challenge to McLaren this season than it did last year, and it's just not materialised. Yeah, just an awful season for Ferrari. And as I say, one it will wish to forget. and just get into next season as quickly as he possibly can now.
Hopefully they can have a good weekend. Will they be in any of our predictions? Let's find out, because before we end this week's episode, we need to do our... Who knows? We need to do our predictions for this weekend's United States Grand Prix. To quickly look over the Racing News 365 predictors leaderboard. It is the fans in last on 76 points, Sam in third on 84, I am in second on 88, Ian is in the lead on 108, so a 20-point buffer for Mr. Parks. And we will go first with the predictions from the fans, who for this weekend are being represented by Kathleen from Atlanta in the United States. So we have an American representing the fans for the US Grand Prix, as it should be the case. And Kathleen has predicted that George Russell will keep going with his good form and claim pole position, that Charles Leclerc will finish in third, Russell in second, but that Max Verstappen will win. Kathleen also thinks that Lewis Hamilton will get the fastest lap, Ferrari the fastest pit stop, and that Oscar Piastri will finish P10. I wonder what Kathleen thinks is going to happen. Kathleen, if you're watching this, let us know in the comments what you think is going to happen to the McLaren. I like those. That's some.
I've got a lot.
We've said it's going to be a toasty weekend. There are some toasty predictions.
The title race really wide open.
It really would.
That result.
Sam, you can go next.
Oh, I feel so vanilla compared to those. So I think
Could this be why the fans are last? I'm not sure. I'm sorry, fans. But
I can't see Ferrari getting a podium. Charles or Lewis, I can't see it happening. Pole. I'm going to go Lando. I'm going to go Lando win, Max second, Oscar third in the race. We're going to go Red Bull fastest pit stop. We're going to go Lando fastest lap. And we're going to go Yuki Tsunoda P10.
So you're going for a clean sweep for Lando. Very interesting. Right. Okay, I'll go next.
Just a quick question, Sam. Sam. Since you've constantly had this theme of Yuki Tsunoda P10, how many times has he done it?
I don't think you have. I don't think he has since
I think he did it before we introduced that system, which obviously we did after, I think, the third or fourth round we brought in the P10.
I got him once. I got it once.
You got him once.
Then when I was like, oh, well, I'm going to keep going with this. But it's funny. It's a bit, I know I'm probably not going to score a point from it, but,
It's like your thing.
He was
like your quirk.
It was P10 in both Miami and Imola.
Yes,
not done
which is around when we started doing it.
It is. So, all right.
And you've
okay, this is a tough one. After being a sprint weekend, there's so much pressure on. You can't even say free practice. You can't even say first practice. It's just the only practice. So I will go. I'm going to go Max Pole. Just got a feeling. Max Pole. We will go
on the hype train.
George P3, George third, Oscar second, Max win. We will say Lando fastest lap, McLaren fastest pit stop, which leaves me with P10, I believe. And we will go for Liam Lawson.
Out of interest, what do you think is going to happen to Lando?
Fourth.
Okay.
I just got a feel being a sprint weekend, it just opens up the opportunity for one mistake to be so costly. And it's just, I don't think we're going to see anything crazy between the McLarens, but I just got a feeling. If that Mercedes works, we know that George can take the fight to them. So, Willie, time will tell, as it says on the hat. Ian, bring us home.
Well, you've stolen quite a bit of my thunder, because having seen the way that Max performed with the RB21 around Azerbaijan, the Baku city circuit there, and whilst, yes, they are very different tracks, but there's few characteristics that are similar, I do feel that Max is going to carry on this good run of form. As I say, he's in a good place. He's in a happy place with that car. The car has looked good for these last 4 Grand Prix, effectively, if you take the Dutch Grand Prix into consideration as well. But since the upgrades in particular from Monza onwards, that car's looked very good. And I do feel it's going to be a good package around the circuit of the Americas as well, given its real mix of of low, medium, high-speed corners. So, yeah, I'm going to go Max pole and win. I'm going to go Oscar second. I think he is going to get his elbows out this weekend. And Lando third. I don't see the Ferraris getting into the mix. The only driver I feel might just shake up that order, that top three order, is going to be George. But I'm going to go with that top three. I'm going to go Red Bull fastest pit stop. And then I just believe that leaves P10. And I was going to go Liam. So I did express my, you said that. But so I'm going to go Liam as well, P10. Sorry, pal.
Okay. No, it's okay.
He was in my head. So, yeah,
it is okay. Sam?
So Oscar's going to get pole and win then, because none of us has predicted that he's going to win.
It's probably going to be a McLaren 1-2, and Max a distant third. And that brings an end to this week's episode of the Racing News 365 podcast. If you have been watching on YouTube, please be sure to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment your thoughts below on anything we've discussed and what you are looking forward to at this weekend's US Grand Prix. From Ian, Sam, and I, we will see you this weekend for the United States Grand Prix. See you later.
Take care until then, folks. Thanks, as always, for watching and listening.
Thanks for joining us.